Thank you, Dr. Mendoni. And as a first response, I'd like to invite Mr. Gidi Grinstein, president of the Red Institute, based in Tel Aviv, to give us some perspective in his response.
Thank you. Let me see that works. Works? Doesn't? Yes, it does. Okay. So first of all, thank you very much for the honor of being invited all the way from Israel. I just an hour ago found the Australian colleague. You remember first day it was mentioned, the two people traveled, one from Australia, one from Israel. I'm the Israeli guy. And about 10 years ago, I founded and I ran a group called Re'ut, which in Hebrew means the ability to see clearly, having gone to the Kennedy School of Government here with Petros, a classmate of mine. And the reason I founded this organization is that prior to that, I served in the Bureau of the Prime Minister of Israel, really at the center of power, of politics and government. And I saw the weakness of government when it came to dealing with very complex challenges facing society. And I understood that the weakness of government was structural and institutional. It had little to do with who's in power. And not only that, it's not an Israeli problem, it's a global problem among all developed countries. And therefore, some of the remedy to the problems of society will have to come from the outside. And that insight led me to establish Re'ut. And I believe I'm here today because of the last 10 years, we've been focusing on basically on the social and economic vision of the Israeli society. And from that perspective, I'd like to share with you a few insights. So we asked ourselves 7 years ago, where should Israel be? What is the vision? And the answer was, and I apologize for not being able to get into the details, the answer was that Israel can and should be one of the 15 leading countries in the world in terms of quality of life within 15 years. So that was 2008, and we were shooting for 2023, a decade, 9 years from now. Now, why is this essential for us? For a reason that was mentioned earlier here. In Israel, we have very talented labor and relatively low quality of life compared to other developed countries. And because we have high quality labor and low quality of life, out-migration. We're the #1 exporter of talent in the world on a per capita basis, by far more than any other country. And those of you that are here in American universities, you see it in the student body and in faculty. Very serious problem. And when there's an outgrowing of talent beyond a certain level, it's a very serious problem. So we said we need to leap Israel, and we have done, that's what we've been doing over the last 7 years. And what is really interesting is that only 13 countries over the last 65 years have been able to leap. It's extremely difficult to transform the social and economic condition of a country. And it's an art to do it. And that is the art that I'd like to focus on today, using the examples that were mentioned here as one sector within a much bigger picture. So 3 of the key projects that we have been involved in and are relevant to my presentation. First, we're looking at how to transform a region, a section of the country. In parallel, we're looking on how to transform a city. In this case, the city of Tzfat. It's an ancient city in northern Israel, 24 centuries old, that is unique because it's the beginning of Jewish spirituality. Jewish spirituality began in that city of Tzfat, on the top of the mountain, very high. Today, it's a very poor city and a major tourist attraction. So very interesting combination where you have millions of people coming in from one side, living on the other side. You turn around a little bit like Atlantic City. Poverty over here, deep poverty, one of the poorest communities in Israel. So that's where we've been working, and I believe that based on that experience, I was invited to speak here. Thank you for this invitation. So first of all, so I read this. I read the presentation, the excerpt that we received, and I want to respond in a very sort of Jewish way. And the response in the Jewish way is by asking further questions. And because we don't have a lot of time, and I don't know if I'll get to the end of my presentation, these are the questions I'd like to ask. You all see them. I don't want to read them one by one. But what I can tell you is that based on our experience working in Israel, when you're invested in an infrastructure project that is supposed to be transformational, these questions and other questions are questions you need to be able to ask. What is the vision? What is the strategy? How are best practices going to be extracted? What's the scalability mechanism? And on and on. Each and every one of these questions is a heavy question. So now what I'd like to do is basically to zoom out and then within 8 minutes come back to these questions. So first of all, I want to say something about the Israeli context. We've been speaking about youth unemployment. But basically, youth unemployment, severe crisis in Greece. I have to say, I follow these issues. I'm really interested. I was not aware how deep the crisis is. This is really exceptional challenge that is facing the Greek society. I want to say a few words about the Israeli history. 1951 to 1972, 21 years, 22 years, average per capita growth, 5.5%. Average per capita growth, 5.5%, while the population grew fivefold. So the population multiplies 5 times, from 600,000 to 3 million, and per capita income grows 5.5%. Unmatched economic achievement. 1972, crisis. And then comes the war, 1973, and the energy crisis. From 1974, it is clear that we need to do very serious reforms. Only in 1985, 11 years later, we call this the lost decade, the reforms are happening. We moved from no inflation to hyperinflation, 400%. We moved from huge surplus in currency to zero foreign currency reserves. Banking system collapsed and nationalized, and I could go on and on. So only when we were literally almost hitting the bottom of the bottom, the political will was found to reform. So 10 years, okay? Then come the first wave of reform. A whole decade of deep reform of every section of the economy and the society until the mid-1990s, and now we're into the second decade of reform. My bottom line, my message is, you're probably looking at 30 years of work here. And that's very important because this is a horizon. Bill Gates said, people overestimate what can be done in a year, but underestimate what can be done in a decade. This is 30 years here looking ahead. But I want to tell you of some of what happened in Israel. This, you know, American discourse, 1%. Top line, the amount of capital in society owned by the top 1% of the population. Israel is no different. Bottom is 80% of the population reflects on the bottom line. Israel is just the same. We moved from being the most egalitarian society to the least, one of the 3 most polarized societies among developed countries. Poverty, that we didn't know and we didn't have. Over here, what you can see, okay, this is Sao Paulo, Brazil. This is Israel, the wealthiest neighborhood in Israel, the poorest neighborhood in Israel, separated by a wall. We didn't have these gaps 25 years ago. Okay? Social protest. You have photos from 4 continents. Israel here included. Over here, this is Israel. One of them is Egypt. One of them is Chile. One of them is Europe. And then your Greece over here. Okay, so what is the vision? And my argument is, when you're talking about a sector that is so central to the economy and to the society, like culture and tourism, there has to be a discussion of the vision of the country. That is a conversation that has to take place in context. So 2029, 15 years down the road, is random. Could have been 2024, could have been 2034, as long as it's deep into the future and we can begin to actually discuss directions. And what I can tell you is, based on our experience in Israel, the old distinction between socialism, capitalism no longer works. Okay, so I'm on the 3-minute line, and I want to say that there are key things that are essential in the public sphere for us to be able to move forward. There has to be vision, There has to be a mobilization of the serving elite. It's not the political elite. It's the people out there in society that are mobilized to implement the vision, values, certain institutions. We don't have the time to get into that. And very, very important, development policy. Unique global and regional development policy. So these are interventions of the government that are designed with tools of government that leverage the unique assets that you have as a country based on regional approach. Every region has a slightly different approach, and jiving with the global trend, which is key. If you're not connected to a global trend, let me skip that slide. If you're not connected to a global trend, very, very difficult to grow. Now, it's a shared effort of society. What you see here are events that we did in Israel. Hundreds of people from all over society participate in discussing the vision and the strategy of the country. And from now, I want to basically focus on the project that we're here to discuss. And I want to basically say that this is a partnership between the government and a philanthropy. But when we're talking about transforming a country, these are two very different roles. So I want to focus on the role of philanthropy because I believe the role of government may be clearer. First of all, there has to be understanding of the global trend. In this case, you see Madonna, and she's wearing a shirt called Kabbalists Do It Better. The Kabbalah is the Jewish spirituality that began in Tzfat. So when Madonna sings in a concert with the word Kabbalah on her shirt, it means it's a global trend, and we have a big opportunity. Second approach is cluster. For a city or for a sector to be transformed, there has to be a cluster of institutions and activities. Some of them are business, that has been discussed, but many of the elements of the cluster are non-business. They are not-for-profit, academic institutions, research, and on and on. I could relate to that. Third element that is essential, a network of small units, far more resilient than a few big projects. And that's key, nurturing the small units. Next, what you see here is round tables. I know it's a little bit hard to see. 130 round tables, you're only seeing here 20. Every round table here had an entrepreneur that was doing something remarkable in Israel. And he or she were teaching others. Okay, so this is basically about knowledge creation. Someone said earlier something very insightful. All the knowledge necessary to take Greece out of its trouble is available today, right now in Greece. You need to find these people, to learn from them, to model them, and then to scale them. Here are 130 case studies in different halls as well. Every table here, someone teaching other people about a great initiative in Israeli society. Okay, next point is addressing market failure. What we see here, we have a region in Israel. I'm sorry, I didn't have in English. There is a region in Israel where there are a lot of micro businesses in the area of tourism. What you have there is a whole that is much smaller than the sum of the parts. Why? Because all these little businesses are competing. No one is, there's no transparency, etc., etc. Oh, I need to finish? I'm sorry? Okay. So what you see here is a philanthropist takes an initiative. And this is an initiative about transparency. She goes to all these micro businesses and she says, you be what you say you are. If you're saying you're a 600 euro a night or dollar a night high-end resort, be that. And if you say that you're a camping site, be that. But I want you to be clean. I want you to offer services. And she totally transformed the ecosystem. Philanthropic intervention, zoomed in on market failure, turning a whole area around. And now she's also involved in training them and so on. Another key element, the government comes in, I'm sorry I didn't have an English photo, builds a faculty of medicine, $400 million investment in a very poor community. This could have easily become a gated community. Right? Faculty of medicine, poor people, why should they interact? A lot of work came into being to connect the two together, including, for example, I don't want to get into the details, but dozens of initiatives that we work with the municipality to connect the poor community to these signature projects. If you're not focused on it, it doesn't happen, this inclusiveness. The last thing I'll say, so here again, these are the questions I'd like to ask. about these projects. Obviously, we don't have the time to invest them. But I want to say something about your leadership role, the Niarchos Foundation. The more I've been here, the more impressed I am with the opportunity that is available to you. What you see here in blue is the existing mindset. What you see here in red is the emerging reality. When the emerging reality escapes the existing mindset, this is how we're organized to do things in blue. We have what we call fundamental surprises. These are surprises that don't occur because we don't have information, simply because reality is changing. So we're in denial, and we don't believe it's happening, but at some point you can no longer suppress this gap. And that's when huge upsets occur. Businesses are erased. We all remember there used to be a Kodak. It's no longer here, right? Countries go into civil war. You went into a huge crisis. This is when the moment of fundamental learning begins and leadership. And what I want to say is that it's an extremely difficult period for all the reasons that you see here to be able to contain with this change. But I'd like to say is that you here in the Niarchos Foundation, a lot of people would want you to be providing technical solutions to technical problems. But really what is necessary is an adaptive learning. And the problem with adaptive learning is there are no textbooks, no experts. No one knows the solution to the challenge of Greece today. No one. Everybody needs to figure it out together. So there needs to be someone who's leading this. And I think, based on what I learned, that this foundation has the potential to lead this, because we have to understand no one has authority over this challenge. The government doesn't have authority over this challenge. No one owns this problem. So it's a matter of leadership and societal innovation. And with that, I'll close. There is a lot of conversation we had about technical innovation, physical innovation. The wheel, the cell phone was mentioned, the BlackBerry. But really what is required is societal innovation. New ways of organizing people to solve the problems that are faced by the society. So if in one slide, the challenge, this is it. Help your country and your nation and your society move along the yellow line. And unfortunately, sorry, skip that, no easy answers. Thank you.